Hello and welcome to Circle Passages and Higher Ground. We're at TC Media Studios here in Olympia, and just an incredible venue we always talk about, but it's just great to be here, great support. That's who's making this possible right now. Crew behind the scene. We're going to get to see their names later with the credits, but thank you very much. And actually, Heather and I have been doing some shows for the last few years, and a lot of times around rites of passage, and just missed something. It was a workshop that you had set up. And in fact, I'm curious to find, I don't remember if we even talked about if you were able to do that, because it seemed like you got sick like a few days beforehand.
Yeah,
So
the frog,
cocooning,
the
right?
frog in my throat. Yeah, I'm still cocooning.
Still there, yes. And that was the title of the workshop too, right? Cocooning. So
Yeah.
I was hoping you could tell us what that's all about.
Yeah, thanks, Buck. Good to be here.
Yes.
Good to be with this great place. Yeah, so cocooning, in a way, getting sick was a way to deepen the cocoon. And I was telling you that my youngest son, Alec, did a 5-day fast, which is another form of cocooning that he came out of. And I also did a cocooning process that I can weave in with my felt artist friend Janice Arnold, where I cocooned up and felt beautiful felt that she made that went all around the planet with a traveling exhibit. And literally wrapped myself up, or she wrapped me up in a forest in a cocoon of felt. But the cocoon is that archetypal container, that alchemical or transformational container that you create to do what a butterfly does, the symbol of psyche and soul, where you liquefy. Liquefaction is one of the alchemical stages, and you literally turn into a puddle of goo and imaginal cells, and then you kind of reimagine yourself, and you go through that metamorphosis, that kind of quintessential transformation into a butterfly, which is just such an inconceivable image and transformation from the cocoon into something that has a totally different vantage and vision of the world.
What a process, huh? I mean,
What a process.
Wow.
Yeah.
And to go from liquid to solid, that's very interesting too, that piece of it.
Yeah, and it's another way to look at it too, as a dark night of the soul, because the caterpillar, of course, doesn't know it's turning into a butterfly. And when we're in the darkness, in the cocoon, melting, usually when you say I'm melting, you're like turning into a puddle of goo. It's not your best moment, And yet you're turning into something that you can't imagine in that moment. And part of that is the darkness, and the cocoon helps hold you, but it can also magnify the darkness, that concept that it's darkest before dawn, the deepest transformation. We know that from the rite of passage, before the sun rises on that final day, if you're fasting. The darkness where, when it wasn't COVID, it was before that, when we were going through the financial crisis, and there was a bumper sticker that said, to save money, the light at the end of the tunnel has been turned off. But, that concept of a cocoon, we tend to think of as a womb and beautiful, but it also, when you're in it, can be a nadir, a darkness, the dark moment before dawn, when light is coming, but you can't remember it, or you can't imagine it. And so it can also be a profound darkness, like the dark night of the soul.
And you just mentioned that too, it's so similar to being in the womb, fetus, and that child growing in darkness. Yeah. And like you say, at some point, child doesn't realize there's going to be light, because it's not bad right here.
No, and it's a shock. There's a shock of transformation. There's a shock of emergence. And I just attended a lecture earlier today, and part of it was talking about when we come into incarnation, and they were referencing the myth of drinking from the river, is it Lete, but forgetting. You know, the shock, like when a baby comes out, it's a profound shock. It screams. It goes from essentially like not only a cocoon, but it's also like a, one of those float tanks, you know, where you're in perfect equilibrium.
Yes.
And then you come out into the world and it's just like, what the heck? You know? So we tend to imagine these things, almost glamorize them as beautiful, but they can also be shocking. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's totally different. What you've just been doing for 9 months is, well, what's
Right.
going on here?
Pretty zen.
Send me back.
Right, totally. We, you know, sometimes they say we spend the rest of our lives trying to get back in the womb, you know, into that homeostatic state of balance. And
I don't know if they do that anymore, but slap on the bottom. I mean, so it's not
they
only.
don't,
Yeah,
mercifully.
okay.
They don't do that anymore. Or at least
Yeah,
I didn't have that. Yeah.
because it's like not only am I not in my safe cocoon any longer,
Right.
somebody's whacking me.
Yeah, well, it's so crazy because you literally go from not being touched and you're in this perfect environment that's self-regulated. And I think that's part of what we're remembering. And Alec just did this 5-day fast and this kind of reiteration of that womb experience. And we literally, my husband mainly followed my lead in doing a ritual, but led him closing his eyes, so we guided him out into the hot tub, cool pool, and sauna. Mercifully, we had those things because it was like 24 degrees out. But re-invoking the mystery, like closing your eyes and being submerged in water, because there was that liquefaction, that kind of almost baptismal rebirth. And so that's what a rite of passage is, of course, recreating that kind of cocoon, that womb of transformation to facilitate that reemergence and also the remembering of who we are. Like, who in the heck are we?
Yeah, that's always a real interesting trip in itself.
Yeah.
And kind of going back to the cocooning and being in the womb is, I didn't get a chance to participate in the workshop, so I wasn't quite sure. While being in the cocoon, let me back up just a second. In the womb, in a sense, there's communication, not like we're doing right now, but between mom and the fetus or the baby, right? But was just curious, while you're in the cocoon, kind of what's going on as far as you as the individual, what you might be thinking about, or what is that we're looking for, if you would, or just don't look for anything and just be and experience.
Yeah, I think there's merit to all of that, but I didn't get to go to the retreat either because I got sick.
Sure.
But first, I guess I'd bring in that there's obviously the umbilicus that's connecting the mother and the baby, and there's a correlate with, in the Hindu or Eastern tradition, Buddhism, the Antakarana, so this kind of channel and connection to a cosmic womb, if you will, and a cosmic mother, if you will. Mater, mater, mother share the same root. And so part of what you're getting in touch with is an inner connection. You know, so within the womb, you're connected to the mother, and that is cut. And there's almost this forgetting when you come into incarnation, shock. You know, you're just seriously like, what am I doing here, probably? And then part of what we're doing in recreating the cocoon, whether it's a rite of passage or a retreat, like what I've created, and I do have it online, but it's to help you self-reflect. So imaginal cells and mirror neurons, and you reflecting within yourself, but also reflecting within a container of a group. So what I created that I was trying to recreate that womb-like sense. So I was going to feed people. Would you believe that? My love language is food. I'm like, this has to be deeply nourishing. Have it where people can land and not move. So like Alec didn't eat. So you could eat or not eat, but have it be really easy. Like food is not something you have to put energy into. And create a container that has that mirroring aspect of reflecting you back in on yourself. So self-reflective journaling, art. We're going to create our own butterfly, or I was going to make myself a moth, and I did, a moon moth. But just really spending the time dedicated between 1 year and the next, which is this perfect time to go inward and then come out, death and rebirth between those turnings of the cycles, on who am I? Who was I in this past year as a cocoon? Who am I emerging as into this new space? And as you know from rite of passage, to really create a threshold crossing where it's like, and I'm coming out. And I'm coming out in this way, and I'm leaving this behind.
And that, especially with the concept of cocoon, and it's a caterpillar, and who that caterpillar is going to become is, I mean, that's how whoever even, like the great energy of the universe, that whole concept of you're going from something that's not real great to look at necessarily, a little rough around the edges, literally.
Very fuzzy.
But then, yeah, exactly. And then you've got this incredible butterfly. Wow. Talk about metamorphosis.
Yeah, it reminds me, there's a little joke that's two caterpillars looking up at a butterfly, and one says to the other one, they'll never get me up in one of those things. But, think of the vantage. You're this little inching caterpillar on the ground or crawling up a tree, perhaps, and then you're a butterfly. It's just like the perfect, no wonder it's the symbol of psyche and the soul and metamorphosis, because it's almost incomprehensible.
That's for sure. And what you're describing, I'm kind of reflecting on the vision quest, for example. So, you're kind of creating an energy sphere, if you would, or an energy place that you're going to be when you go out on your own solo, doing the power circle.
Yeah.
But it also seems like, you at least what I recall is I'm asking for, so what's my vision going to be? I might have some ideas, but it's like being in this circle, and I'm doing this because it kind of felt like, in a way, that you create an invisible womb. But I'm wondering too, is like the cocooning that you're talking about, should that be something that we do first and then do a vision quest?
I actually kind of think you can do both, and sometimes there's fasting. Like sometimes the pilgrimage aspect has the vision quest and what we think of as the rite of passage proper, at the end. But sometimes the preparation, that stage of separation, is a long one. Like when people literally walk on a pilgrimage, sometimes that can be a month. Like often, we both prepared for the rite of passage and changing our diet and doing medicine walks and self-reflecting. And so I think that's part of that cocooning. But what you were talking about with the circle, the power circle that you create with stones or however you delineate it on the land, that is very much cocooning. And the drumming in, like your name, your vision, who am I? You can think of the cocoon in so many different ways, but that to me is the heart of it, that power circle. And going in that, for those people who haven't done it, you are on the rite of passage, the wilderness quest, you're out on your own with the solo vigil, and you create this circle of power that when you step into it, you're kind of stepping into yourself. And that to me is like the heart of the cocoon. And especially that last night when you're invited, though you don't have to stay up and to watch the passage of that dark night of the soul, of the stars emerging in their beauty and the the sunrise emerging in your power circle, and you can drum or you can, do whatever, listen to your heartbeat, that to me is kind of the heart of the cocoon. And, and then the butterfly emerges and it still has, soft, vulnerable wings, and there's a part on integration and just as there is on preparation and separation, but it's all part of a larger cocoon. Maybe it's like nesting.
And what it also kind of seems like to me symbolizes is starting there, because just as we're incarnating, so it's that birth for us to show up before we can even think about. So who am I? I don't know what's going on. I don't remember that. I don't know if you can go back to that time when you could start thinking as a fetus, anyway,
I
or
think you can.
as a baby. Yeah. Okay. I don't know who's going to measure that one or how they're going to do that,
Yeah.
but just kind of like, okay, well, I'm real content right here, and I don't know what's going on, but this is where I'm at, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, and it's kind of a discussion of what is a container, a cocoon, and your whole incarnation, as you're saying, is like a container. The womb that you come from, and then of course we go, our first breath and our last breath, we're incarnated in this container, which is our cocoon for our lived experience as our soul, or our animating presence, however you want to say that. But yeah, there's so many ways to think about creating a conscious container, which is, I think, the heart of the issue is, how do we create containers of transformation for growth? How do we create cocoons? And we don't give ourselves downtime is one thing. How do we give ourselves, like Sundays used to be an archetypal day of downtime,
Right.
and that's like, gone the way of the dodo with soccer games and Little League and
Yes.
whatever else,
Stores are open or whatever.
Yeah, so part of it is, how do we create natural time for us to go inward and to really protect it, which is part of what the cocoon does, so that we can rehabilitate. And like some of the other words that I thought of for the cocoon were restoration, not only reformation and transformation, but restoration.
Yeah.
And how do we go fallow, like in the winter, it's a dormant stage. How do we really honor that inward part before we re-emerge?
Sounds good. For sure.
Yeah.
And just that cycle that you're describing too is just so marvelous. But it seems like we're so impatient, we human beings, that there's too much other stuff going on, too much stimulus, I guess, or stimuli, and it's not to slow it down. I guess what as you were explaining it too, is to be more deliberate about those things. Is set the time aside. So the workshop that you were talking about is not so much, gee, it would be nice to do that. That's really essence for the whole organism here, mind, body, soul, spirit.
Yeah, and in our rational, evidence-based world, here's some evidence. So the brain is the most active and the most productive in downtime. So when they first started designing the experiments, they thought it would be in directed thought, like figure out this hard math problem or something. But it's in our creative imagination, our daydreaming, that the brain lights up the most. And then another correlate to that is we are literally the most productive when we take a break. Like that whole Archimedes having the eureka moment, how to measure gold, through displacement when he was taking a bath. Stanford's done studies where it is literally the eureka moment comes not in the striving, but in the downtime. And so we actually are the myth, as in not the profound story, but the falsehood, is that striving constantly and working constantly is more productive. It's not. And so it's almost like we have to deprogram ourselves to really remember and realize or make real, we need this. We literally were designed for this, and we're handicapping ourselves by not allowing ourselves that inward downtime.
What you're describing sounds like our entire lifetime just about spend achieving, striving for, like you were
Right.
saying, as opposed to, as you're mentioning, is the real creativity comes from when we back off and take a break and, wow, then these things show up. Why can't we just get ourselves around that? But it's not an easy shift.
It's not an easy shift, but big corporations know it. You know, it's almost like that falsehood lives. It's part of the American dream, you know, but it is literally a misnomer. Like, downtime makes us more productive. Creativity and imagination are the most productive our brain is, you know, so it's part of it is us really having to let that sink in and then really honoring it. Especially the most highest, hardest problems, like those deepest revelations are the ones that require letting it go. So you strive and then you let it go, and then statistically, analytically, the answer comes to you when you let it go, like a butterfly. And so we just have to remember that and then really honor it, which we paradoxically feel like it's selfish, you know, but it's actually the opposite. Like, we literally will be the highest achieving of ourself for self-transformation and all of the aspects of self that we look for when we allow ourselves that inner time, like the rite of passage, which seems like, I don't have time to take a week off, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, dude, you don't have enough time not to, you know? So.
Some of what you're describing too, a lot of what you're describing too, is what I think another way of doing this is to slow it down is the meditation, or doing meditation is to, again, be deliberate and take that time. And what are we trying to do is still the mind.
Right.
You know, it's kind of regroup and restore, hopefully. So it's during that time when you come out of the meditation, I know to me it's like, it's the energy that carries me through the rest of the day, is that time right there. Let's bring it all in.
Yeah.
But we don't.
And there's another one of those paradoxes where the happiest people from brain scans, against evidence-based, are monks and nuns who have austere lives, some of who meditate in caves. You know, I mean, it's so the opposite of the American dream, and yet they're the happiest people. So, you know, it's just that paradox of what you want isn't out there, it's in here. And you don't get it by trying, you get it by being. You know, I mean, it's just like this movement and antiodromia into the opposite, but you have to decondition, especially the whole American myth, as in falsehood, that everything, it's commercial, honestly. It's the gerbil wheel. They're trying to get us to be like, I need to be something other than who I am. But yeah, just take a moment and breathe in to the opposite of that.
And we just went through one of those cycles recently. I mean, it's not to really cast a shadow on Christmas, but it's the commercial piece that it seems like it's become. You know, it's like months in advance. Black Friday, when was the first Black Friday? What's that all about? But it's the push to, you need to be buying, you know, you need whatever it is, as opposed to, let me slow down, and because the winter solstice is right just before the 25th, obviously.
And the 25th was something that one of the earliest Roman, I can't remember who it was, but I was just reading, they picked the 25th because of its proximity to the winter solstice and just randomly said it, but it really is the winter solstice that we're celebrating, which is that rebirth of light in the darkest time, which is obviously why I was cocooning in the winter, is it's the darkest time, and then there's the coming of light from that. But yeah, the gratitude, the Eucharist literally means grateful, gratitude. You're, you know, so it's remembering what is the inner meaning that has been commercialized and into essentially, you could say, falsehood? And what is the inner truth beyond that?
Absolutely, and it seems like how much we, I don't know, whatever, we just disregard one of our greatest teachers, the greatest teachers, Mother Nature.
Yeah.
So the seasons and the equinoxes and the solstices, she gives us, and yet it's kind of like, well, let's get past that because there's this other thing over here. And I like recently thinking, we call it New Year's Eve. Well, what happened to December 31st? It's kind of like that gets shoved aside. We know it's December 31st, but we think of it as well as New Year's Eve. So we get caught up in all these other things where let's back up, and it's almost like for me to celebrate the winter solstice is what this season is about. The other stuff definitely partake in, but that is really the celebration at this point.
Yeah, and remembering and mapping on natural time. The solstices, the equinox, and then also we're so about striving and going forward. Usually it's actually a linear model, not a circular model. But I also really wanted and designed the cocoon to go backwards. Because having the cancer and that whole near-death experience that simulates what people experience when they do die, which is a looking back. And looking back particularly with the perspective of how did my life touch other people's lives. So I designed this cocoon to look back over the year because we spend so much time looking forward. And everything's almost leaning out of our own center forward. But we don't want to worry about the past or feel bad, but to really go back to mine it for the jewels, like the buried treasure of what did I experience in this, so that we can take it with us as we go forward. And so it was a bit of a retrograde, almost a mercurial movement before we go forward. But I think we don't do that enough. We don't look back. And hindsight's 2020. Well, let's look back a little bit more and see what we've forgotten and what we could bring forward with us.
So time-wise, I don't recall that whatever with a caterpillar being in the cocoon. What's the time frame before they become butterflies?
Oh, good stumper question, Beck. I
Sorry
don't
about
know.
that.
No, that's good. I'll have to look that up. I don't know. I know I'm going to throw in something randomly different, but I know that the archetype of death and rebirth is that 3 days, Jesus descended, was killed, descended, and ascended. And so Inanna, even an early Persephone myth, there are over 142 sun gods that had that archetypal death in 3 days, descent and rebirth. And the whole part too about the descent is that you are going in to help others, going into the earth, going into the womb, going down into the earth. The burial is very caterpillar womb-like, the stone is rolled over, you're inside the earth, and you're going to help others. You're going to, mythically and archetypally, you're going to help the collective, those who've gone before, to help our intergenerational trauma and healing, healing embodied in the land. So one of the meta movements is it's not just about you. If you go into your caterpillar cocoon and come out and you think it's about you, you need to circle back around.
Back in there then.
Yeah, because the thing that saves us is that it's not just about us, or another way to say that is it's about the self as the big S self, which is everything, not our little s self. And that movement is what really actually saves us, because it makes us one with everything, makes us one, our nature with nature, and it makes us feel better. I don't know about you, but when I feel bad, I'm like, oh, that's because I've identified with my separate little Thumbelina self of Heather. I'm not that.
Sure.
I'm going to bring in my cosmic
I was
Heather
just
doll.
going to ask you, yes.
Yeah, so we were talking about Barbie before, and Barbie was literally, the Maytel executive in Germany picked it up in a bar. They were in bars and brothels. And Barbie was literally designed after a high-end call girl named Lily. Go figure. Anyone who looked at Barbie actually knew that already. So then after the rite of passage, we went to the Barbie movie, and it got me thinking about, besides just dismembering old Barbie dolls, what could I do about this? And so I found these cloth balled dolls, and I put a bunch of butterflies. It's kind of a flower child. We were talking about it doesn't have anything to do with gender. You know, it's kind of this prepubescent, both genders. I called it Cosmic Heather. Has free love, and it has the chakras, has the mushroom. Anyway, but it's who are we, in whose image are we remembering ourselves? That concept of the Imago Dei, the image of God, but the image of the Creator. In whose image are you reborn? And it could be a new name, it could be a vision, like on the Vision Quest. Certainly not a high-end call girl named Lily.
Really?
And
Please.
it's not Barbie, but it's that basic question of, if we are reborn from this womb as a butterfly, what is that to us? And my son Alec, who just went through this rebirth process, I didn't even realize that his name Alec comes from Alexander, and it's protector and guide of humankind. You know, but so part of it can be a deeper insight into your own name that you were actually originally given. Part of it can be your own name you're given, like mine was Daughter of the Sunrise. What was your name, Buck? Or did you have a name that you came away with?
It's still a work in progress.
Blossoming, you're still cocooning.
There you go, yes, blossoming.
Yeah, so, but that concept of, you know, in whose image, like, I get to create myself in my own image. Who is that? Like, that's why we had the butterfly art activity. It's like, what is the pattern on my wings? I was going to make eyes, those great eyes. But, you know, like, am I a moth? Am I a butterfly? What am I called to do? You know?
Definitely. In fact, what I was going to ask you, too, is Cosmic Heather.
Yeah.
As in addition to earthly Heather, so some differences there, or what? How do you see that, being cosmic as well as being earthly?
Yeah, so she has the earth through roots. She's got all kinds of stuff going on. But I think one of the hallmarks of our time is we talk about a global consciousness, identifying in that S, the big S, is to realize I am not only apart from, but a part of the earth. Nothing is separate. Energetically, anatomically, in terms of the movement of atoms and subatomic particles, literally nothing is separate. It is a earth. And more than that, it's also an earth within a solar system. You know, parts within parts, always within a greater whole. And so that's one of the hallmarks of our time, I think, is that global consciousness, so that we can share resources, so we can find a homeostatic balance as in equality and justice on a planet. But then that begs the question, within what greater cocoon or womb? The solar system. And within what greater cocoon? You know, it's that nesting outward. And so to me, the cosmos is a part of that, you know, with our science and with the Hubble imagery. Beauty,
amazing, yes.
Beauty. The greatest step for mankind, but also achievement, I think, might be to be able to map the cosmos, to map the gestation of the multiverse. I mean, phew. And so Cosmic Heather is an ode to that, even though I'm terrestrial and celestial, I'm going to say, Buck.
Nice combination there, for sure. And thinking about that with our own solar system anyway, not even so much the universe, but let's say just kind of giving each of the sun, of course, but the planets, kind of like a consciousness. And it's kind of looking at Earth. And so what the heck's going on over there anyway? You know, are they in this process of rebirth? Or because it sure looks like first they're going in the direction of let's just destroy this and kind of see how we evolve from there. I don't know, but I kind of wonder what the...
We look like we're melting into a puddle of
Really?
goo. We're liquefying into imaginal cells. And that's where I love Tolkien's, at least he popularized it, eucatastrophe. So we look like we're going south. Like, you know, there's that bumper sticker. Where am I going and why am I in a handbasket? You know, to hell in a handbasket. But that it can be a eucatastrophe. And honestly, that's what the dark night of the soul is all about. It's like, and often I get sick when I'm going through a major initiatory movement, a transformational movement, and I shed the old, whether it's like snakeskin, I'm shedding mucus, I'm liquefying. And so, yeah, we're a hot mess right now as a species, and we're jeopardizing our planet's equilibrium and our children and grandchildren's futures. And there's that movement that I really hope for, which is a cosmic global consciousness, which is what it'll take to identify with the larger self and the whole, for us to kind of pull it together and become one, atoned to become one. And that's why I think the global consciousness is so essential, is we will only have equality when we identify as a whole, I suspect. And we'll only have justice then. And to bring in Jimi Hendrix, who's the best, you know, that whole, you know, when the power of love overcomes the love of power. And there's also no justice, no peace, no justice, no peace, N-O and K-N-O-W. You know, we need to identify as a whole. We need to have the love power versus the power of love. You know, this is a movement of consciousness, of who are we, how do I identify, and that's why this whole thing of a rebirth, who are you? Who are you, all of us? We are in a cocoon, we're in a dark night of the soul. Who are we gonna be as a species? And that's kind of our meta question.
Yeah, no, that's a big one, that's for sure. No question about that. And it just seems like, you know, we kind of tiptoe and we, every now and then, actually, let's say, dip into the water to get that idea of love, the 60s.
Yeah.
You know, but then it's kind of like we get pulled out of that, or we allow ourselves to get pulled out again, and then it's like all this war and destruction, and you know, I love something that your dad has talked about is a roll of toilet paper.
Oh yeah.
And getting the biggest one you can find, and whether it's at the first sheet or the last sheet, that represents us, human beings. So what's the rest of the roll all about? So, you know, development of this planet, the solar system probably, but the plants, animals, at least on this planet, and how long that has taken. And because like all the things you were just describing, we're grappling with, and it just seems like we have been for eons. In my mind, the rationalization is we're still in our birth, I mean our childhood, infancy, that one sheet, let's say, because there are a bunch of other sheets that there's a whole lot more that they've already accomplished that we haven't even come close to.
Yeah, I mean, the trick is that we have the creative power to destroy ourselves without necessarily the consciousness of love and humility. So it's kind of like Icarus and Daedalus, the flying too high to the sun, you know, the hubris that precedes the fall. And so, you know, that's part of, or another image is the, you know, the newly emergent butterfly, but who's so vulnerable. And so part of this is the humility, and that comes from humus earth, you know, to I call it a barefoot ethic, but to walk with your feet barefoot on the earth, to remember that we're connected. And I think sometimes they call it the heresy of separation, that our imagining, and it partly is rooted in Genesis, but that we are not separate from the heresy of separation, that we have imagined ourselves above the earth and above the other species, and yet we are one with them. and that has cost us a lot. It's jeopardizing our entire equilibrium on our planet. And so to kind of reground and to remember and to, in all the different myths, people are created from the earth, to remember we are of the earth, and to recreate ourselves in that image, which is an image the earth knows how to be in homeostatic balance. And that's really the heart of what we need to remember.
And that's an incredible term in itself, homeostatic balance. Balance of any kind is what it seems like I'll get to that later.
Yeah.
There's something else that has to be done, but we're missing the boat of how do we get and maintain or get the balance happening a little bit more than what we're doing.
Yeah, and I mean, this is the trick, is we need to discipline ourselves. And I grew up with the live simply so others can simply live. Mm-hmm. And so I have my homework of, most of us in the United States are living a life that's a number of times more the blueprint, carbon blueprint, and in other ways, I think it's 20-something, the average non-American life of the resources we consume. And so it's really tricky, because where the rubber meets the road, and I'm talking to myself, cosmic Heather, terrestrial Heather, is, discipline shares the root of disciple. Like we need to self-discipline. Sacred, the root of sacred, is sacrifice. It's, we need to sacrifice, and to do that in honor of our collective nature. And so I'm going to dedicate myself to that back. I was talking to Pat Wald on the way here, and so how do we create like smart goals, measurable, achievable, realistic, all the different things, smart goals, but for ecological impact, for this concept of balance, equality, justice, and consciousness, because part of this is when we have a different consciousness, everything else will fall into place. I really believe that. When the power of love overcomes the love of power, we will know peace. And so we have to bring it back to ourselves. How do we apply this to ourselves? And love is really what will get us to do it. Love of our children. Children, we give dolls to children, and they are our beloved. I have my 3 children. I have a grandnephew who's so cute. But like dedicating it to those 7 generations, that's what usually brings us into balance.
And, talking about something, a word that just kind of jumps out there is humility. We're so, as a species, it seems so arrogant, and we just feel entitled the way our actions are of what we're doing, again, to this wonderful planet. And we just got here when you really think about it, but boy, it's all about us. But the humility is, can we do that as human beings, is start fresh, and then I guess that is the process of hopefully cocooning, going back into that, and again, being very deliberate about it, the workshop.
Yeah, and you're reminding me of, they just put back a couple months ago, Homo naledi, I think, but 175 to 241 approximately 1,000 years ago, the first people, and they were buried in that kind of fetal position of back, returning to the earth, returning to the womb in a fetal position, with ritual art and with ceremony. They could see that from these African caves. And now we're making ecopods. My dad just went over his living will and how he wants to be buried, and he's going to become a tree.
Right.
And it's you're going back into literally a cocoon, like a burlap sack, in that same way that those earliest Homo naledi were buried. And so part of it is the humility of even facing our mortality, like facing our death, that we're temporal, and like not only facing it, but like embracing it. That is what's going to help us bring us into balance, is that the cycles and the seasons of nature include our life and death. And I think that's one of our big American issues, is over half of our medical, which is more than any other part of our budget, is in the last 6 months of people's lives. So part of it is embracing death. And I really think, from my dance with cancer and stuff, death is life and life is death. The thing that we think of as life is the shadow of the life, which is life after death. But we need to really dance with death and grapple in the dark night of the soul of what is one of our primary fears. Our biggest fear probably is death.
And to me, that speaks so much to the resurgence. I mean, it needs to be a resurgence, a whole lot more, because there are some cultures where they're already doing it, but it's the rites of passage and really honoring that. And that whole process, like you said, of at that time, that cycle, that part of our lives that we're leaving is, in order to live, we have to die, like you're talking about, that part of the cycle. But just the rites of passage is kind of have that be a more conscious part of ourselves, I guess, as in this culture anyway, for sure.
Yeah, and you would have loved it, Buck. So Jordan has obviously worked with us more, my middle son.
Yeah.
But Alec, out of the blue, was like, I'm going to do essentially this self-initiated rite of passage. And he had, I need to die, and the death lodge is obviously part of it, but he's just talking in this way that is innate, it's archetypal, it's ancestral, it's human. Because I haven't actually talked to him in this way. I've spent my time talking with Jordan about this. And so it was just fascinating and also inspiring and reaffirming to hear him articulate all of that, what we know of as the death lodge, that you go and you die and you be reborn. And he was just like so ably and emergently created his rite of passage with the archetypal elements that I just, it was just, again, reaffirming. I was like, this is something natural and emergent in our time that we need to remember and facilitate. But it's also like he just did it out of the blue. So it can take so many forms. But yes, we need to remember rites of passage as a way to naturally cocoon and transform.
And you're and not to take anything away from what Alec is doing, but you've created a space, you and Steve have, that where it's, in a sense, he's seeing it, he's living it through you, and that's so cool that he's taking it. It's almost like baby steps, right? We need some help. The parents or somebody's helping us, and then at some point, well, I can do this on my own. It sounds like that's where he's at. But it's, again, that the container you were talking about. You guys have created such a wonderful space for growth, and it's so you're not asking them. I think by this time right here, you should be right. You didn't.
No, we let him do it.
Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is that in initiating himself, he initiated us. I mean, he invited us, and we have to initiate ourselves. But whenever someone transforms, they transform everyone around them. And so the impact of transformation, and that's the gift of consciousness, especially conscious transformation, it invites everybody in. And so, last night we had my other two sons come, and, so it ripples out. And so that's, the many reasons to cocoon, circle passages, to create that circle, is that it ripples out. And we need that because we are in a dark time.
Definitely. And, I know the last 3 years have been very frustrating because of COVID and what we could do or what we wanted to do. And as circle passages and a lot of what you're talking about, but just there was something else that said, not yet. Something else was going on, very powerful. Something else, COVID. But it feels like hopefully now we can kind of emerge again or come out of the cocoon we've been in, and I don't know.
We can for sure back. And it was so beautiful. We did one rite of passage last year.
Yes.
And we went and saw Barbie afterwards. But definitely to do it again. there are so many people, like there are not enough therapists, there's, there's so much illness, there's just eco-crisis, anxiety, the suicide statistics came out, and then honestly, homelessness went up 13% last year. So for so many reasons, there's such a profound need to undergo a rite of passage. And so, we'll lead them in beautiful places in the wilderness. And then I loved how Alec did it too, because he didn't have to spend money or, energy or all these different things. He did it in a way that was really self-contained, where anyone could do it at any time, virtually.
Yes.
And so, yeah, we need it in a million different ways, but for sure, let's take some people out into beauty of nature. And because nature amplifies the transformation.
That's for sure, absolutely. Yeah, and that even so, winter solstice, darkest day of the year.
Yeah.
What, in my mind, what it is we're moving toward the season of light, but it's still in that darkness of the cocoon. Going back to, and I want to just ask you, is doing that workshop again. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Can we do that?
We can do that, yeah. And I'll have it online too, but yeah, we need to do that. And it was actually really affirming, because everyone I asked, said yes. And a number of people said, yeah, this is really synchronous or serendipitous. I need this now, because I think we are turning into puddles of goo. Like it or not, we're kind of melting. And then it's like, okay, well, if we're doing that, let's turn this catastrophe into a eucatastrophe, dark night of the soul, let's cocoon and give it conscious form, which is another way of saying birthing ourselves and supporting ourselves in our transformation.
So maybe when Mother Nature, we catch up with her and spring happens, and that's rebirth, right?
Yeah.
It's a lot of what you're talking about, but let's do some of the groundwork now, the grassroots during this season right here, and all of it. Wow.
Yeah, and I even have make your own doll, because seriously, Barbie, really the image of a call girl? We can do better.
You have, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, it's always such a pleasure, such a joy, and such a cool adventure to talk to you about the things we talk about. So thank you ever so much for sharing.
Thank you, likewise. Yeah. Thanks back, and thank you to the studio again.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, it wouldn't happen if that wasn't here. This support system.
Local
like
media, yeah, we need it.
For sure. Well, thank you, and tune in next time, and hopefully enjoyed what we talked about today.
Thanks,
Thank
Buck.
you.